So congratulations, you are a Dead Cells player and you decided to support the devs by picking up the $5 DLC Fatal Falls. The DLC has brand new weapons, brand new biomes, and of course a brand new boss, and this boss is a real one. The Scarecrow is not only a heavy hitter, it is also a fast hitter, with some attacks that cannot be parried, and a relentless move speed that just runs the player down. If I were to rank this thing, it would definitely be just below Hand of the King in terms of difficulty and probably above Timekeeper, making this a boss that's definitely not meant to be taken lightly. Now first I should say that you can find the Scarecrow in both Undying Shores and in the Caverns. It is a tier 2 boss, so it's in the same subset as the Giant and Timekeeper. In terms of rewards, Timekeeper on 4 BC and higher gives 3 scroll fragments, so that does put it a tier below the Giant in terms of rewards. And I'm sure in some ways it's supposed to be an easier fight, but without the knowledge to go behind it, there's definitely a lot of scary things that can happen here. Now if you're here on my channel for the first time, definitely welcome. I am VeeDotMe. I do lots of other Dead Cells guides, full run videos, and a lot of other roguelike games. If you do end up liking this video, go ahead and subscribe to it. We do a lot of this kind of content. And as always, the best way to play any video game is the way you're comfortable with. If there's any content that you see in this video that doesn't necessarily work well for you, definitely don't force it in. I just hope this serves as a useful guide to the people who may not know some of the little tips and tricks that are out there. Alright, so let's start off talking about the Scarecrow itself. So Scarecrow is a boss that's not like super large. Most of the attacks that the Scarecrow does is directly in front of it, except for some very specific ones we're going to get into later. And the arena itself doesn't have any real hazards to it. The fight takes place on a flat landscape with 2 bumper pads, one on each side, in the shape of a mushroom. The bumper pads are very useful in this fight because just like any other monster in the game, Scarecrow doesn't actually go for the player unless the player is within attack range. So you'll often see it running left and right to catch up to you, waiting for you to land to the ground. However, spoiler alert, there is an achievement for beating this boss without using the jump pads, so definitely keep that in mind for much later out. Scarecrow is also one of those bosses that actually has immunity to some specific status effects. The first one being stun. The Scarecrow cannot be stunned by either stun grenade nor the cudgel shield, and there's no amount of damage you can deal to make Scarecrow stop its attack. When it comes to snaring Scarecrows, Scarecrow can be snared by both the wolf trap and the seismic strike, but just like Timekeeper, the boy axe and the repeater crossbow do not keep it snared for very long. In fact, it will actually force its way to the player while snared, as if the axe and the arrows aren't as strong of a snare as wolf trap. The Scarecrow can be poisoned, can be electrocuted, there is space on the ground for oil, you can catch it on fire, you can do everything besides the stun and some minor snaring. I should also say that Scarecrow is a one-phase fight, so there's no downtime in this fight almost at all. That also means if you're using a build that has arrows to it, there's no phase transition that gives you your arrows back for free. The only way to get your arrows back is either using a skill that gives you arrows or doing a parry on Scarecrow. And of course there's a mutation out there that supposedly rips arrows out of enemies. I don't know what it is, but I hear it's a real thing. Scarecrow can also be frozen and it can be slowed too. Just like any other boss, those do have diminishing return, so it doesn't last forever, but Scarecrow is definitely affected by those statuses. So when you are thinking about going into the Scarecrow, definitely consider what weapons are going to work and which ones don't. And we'll get into that a little later in the video, but just at face value, make sure you aren't thinking about using any kind of stun gameplay, and be careful of any snare gameplay that doesn't use a wolf trap. Scarecrow actually has a number of attacks, maybe not the most attacks in the game, but enough to really get you thinking. What's nice about the Scarecrow is that the attacks happen repeatedly, so it's not a matter of you're just waiting to see this one attack come out. As soon as you see the one, you're gonna get a bunch more after that. Each one is relatively quick. I don't want to say you have to have lightning reflexes to play this, but definitely keep in mind that this is not Concierge. So the first thing that Scarecrow does is it runs at you with the scythe. This is Scarecrow's basic attack. The Scarecrow will do at least 1 slash, but most likely you can get anywhere up to 3 to 5 slashes. Each slash can be parried, and at the time of making this video, there is an issue where the slash does 2 hits. So when you do the parry, you'll actually see 2 pop-ups over your head, and if you're using something like ice armor, you might absorb 1 hit and still take damage. You can also dodge roll through this, and if Scarecrow is slow, then you'll have an easier time landing hits during this attack. But for the most part, it's really hard to hit Scarecrow while it's doing the slashes. This is also a good time to use Phaser to go behind the Scarecrow in order to land those hits. But even if you do that with a slow weapon, think of something like the toothpick or the scythe, the chance of you landing an attack in between Scarecrow slashes are pretty slim. As I said, you can also use the bounce pads to stay away from Scarecrow and try to get all the slashes used up. While Scarecrow is running around, it will probably move on to its next attack once it's done doing all the slashes. Scarecrow's next attack, the Scarecrow will reach into its bag, throw seeds into the air, and there will be 2 to 3 seeds that land and spawn mushrooms. These are the same kind of mushrooms that you can use as a bounce pad. The only difference is the mushrooms take damage and will explode and hurt the player. While the mushrooms are on the floor, Scarecrow will actually go underneath them and knock the mushroom into the sky, aiming at the player. You can avoid this happening by jumping on the mushroom before it gets knocked up, or you can just stay on the ground and prepare to dodge roll. I'm not confident this could be parried as I haven't tried it before, but usually if you're on the floor, you can probably avoid damage. One of the main ways that you can get hit by this is if you use the bounce pads on the edges of the map. For some reason, while you're in the sky, the homing on these mushrooms is bar none, and you will probably get hit if you don't have a dodge roll or armadillo pack prepared. After all the mushrooms are knocked around, the next thing that Scarecrow often does is attacks the player from underground. This is sort of like a whack-a-mole setup. Scarecrow pops up, charges an attack, and then sweeps at the player. This is probably the biggest opportunity to land hits on the Scarecrow because the charge attacks are really slow and they only go in one direction. You can also parry each one of the hits if you like because of the windup is pretty predictable. Another attack that the Scarecrow could do is when it reaches in for seeds, tosses the seeds in the sky, the seeds will land on the ground and turn into mushrooms, but then the Scarecrow itself will jump into the sky. The Scarecrow is tethered by vines on both the left and right side, and it will pull out one of 2 weapons. The first weapon I'll talk about is the pickaxe. While it's easy to tell what the Scarecrow is doing, it's simply hovering overhead and it will stab downward if the player is below it. Easy to dodge roll, and it won't do it while the player is at the same height. One detail that might be missed here is every time that the Scarecrow lunges at the floor, it's actually pulling out mushroom boys when it comes up. There will be a mushroom boy for every single stab that it does into the ground. And just like real mushroom boys, these will charge at the player and deal a ton of damage if it's not avoided. These can be killed just like any other monster, and if you're using something like burning oil on the floor, they will immediately start taking dot damage as soon as they spawn. If you're unable to kill a mushroom boy and you simply dodge roll through, if the mushroom boy is close to the bumper pads at the edge of the level, they'll actually bounce off of that and die once they land on the ground. In a lot of cases, I don't even really pay attention to the mushroom boys aside from doing the dodge roll. If I'm lucky enough to kill them, then great, but chances are they're going to go to the jump pad and then just fall to their own deaths. The second weapon that the Scarecrow might pull out is a watering can. Similar to the pickaxe, the Scarecrow will chase the player with the watering can. The only difference is, even if you use the jump pads to be at the same height as Scarecrow, it will turn towards you and continue to spray water. You can dodge roll through the water. I'm not confident you can parry the water because I haven't tried. From what I can tell, the watering spout doesn't have any effect on the battlefield itself. However, it is a constant stream of damage, and if you do get caught in it, you could find yourself going to 0% health. While Scarecrow is in the sky, it is susceptible to being hit. If you deal enough damage on either side, the vine will go away, and if you break both vines, Scarecrow will fall to the floor. If you don't break the vines, Scarecrow will eventually stop doing attacks in the sky anyway. In this way, breaking the vines only really gives you a few less attacks to deal with. Otherwise, I'm not sure it's completely important to make sure you knock Scarecrow out of the sky. Now, once this thing is back on the ground, it has one more attack that's going to try to do using the sickles, which are its signature weapon. The Scarecrow will go into the center of the arena, jump into the sky, and then it will simultaneously throw the sickles to the left and the right as it does a ground pound directly below it. As you can guess, the ground pound deals damage right around the Scarecrow's hitbox. There is space a few character widths next to the Scarecrow that is safe. And then as the sickles fly out, they actually fly out to the corners of the arena. So you can imagine there's a cone on both sides of the Scarecrow that's actually both safe zones. Now, once the sickles get to their maximum range, they will actually circle around and sweep back towards the Scarecrow. This is where a lot of people actually do take the hit. You can dodge roll through these. You can actually parry them, but at the time of me making this video, the parry positioning is sort of off. You basically have to be facing towards the right in order to parry either sickle. To be honest, this is probably where I lose my no-hit 90% of the time. Ideally, you want to stand next to the Scarecrow, let the first sickle go by, and then as it's coming back, do a simple dodge roll across the ground. The Scarecrow may do this attack multiple times, so don't think that the one ground pound is the only one that's going to do. As you reduce the Scarecrow's health bar, it's going to continue to do all of these attacks, in some cases faster, in some cases in more successions than previously, with no breaks in between, until either you kill it or it kills you. As you're doing this fight, always think about when you can actually land a hit compared to it hitting you, and all the little sneaky hits that the Scarecrow can get in utilizing both the Mushroom Boys, the jump pads, and the sickles. I'd say don't bait yourself into using the jump pads too much. Obviously they do help, but sometimes you're a sitting duck in the sky just waiting to get hit by a sickle. Now, just like a lot of other bosses in the game, there are some weapons that do really well versus the Scarecrow and some that don't do so well. From a super quick top-down view, you can imagine that faster weapons do the best and slow weapons do the worst. And that's basically true for the most part. Starting off with melee weapons, a lot of our slower weapons are probably not the best thing to take into that fight. Things like the Giant Killer, the new Toothpick, the Scythe, all weapons that struggle doing the basic combo on the ground. But what you can do is try to utilize the jump pad, charge the first attack in the sky, land it on your way down, and then try to prepare your next attack after you do the dodge roll. If you're using any kind of snare, such as the Boy Axe or the Wolf Trap, or if you have a slow such as Ice Shards, if you have freezing like the Ice Grenade, those are things that are going to be monumental in this fight. And if you happen to be walking into Scarecrow without some kind of crowd control using survival weapons, you might struggle a little bit. Weapons that require fancy positioning, such as the Meat Skewer, Valmont Whip, Tentacle, and Rhythm and Bouzouki also struggle in this fight because you are constantly being ran down by the Scarecrow. You end up losing attack opportunities while you're trying to find the right spot to land hits. Furthermore, a lot of the instances that Scarecrow gives you to land a hit, not only the timing, but the positioning's tight, such as the down slam. If you want to land the Valmont Whip hit there, you can, but then you have to dodge roll either backward or through the Scarecrow, and you won't be able to land hits afterward. Of course, melee weapons that actually do well are ones that don't require any kind of fancy combo, or they have high attack speed, or they don't care about positioning or you getting hit, etc. So weapons like the Spite Sword, when you combine it with Vengeance, is really easy to get a kill on the Scarecrow. Weapons like the Crowbar do really well because of the high attack speed. Flashing Fans can actually knock away the sickles, so those might give you some crits. The Iron Staff actually does a really good job at parrying Scarecrow's attacks and giving you the one crit after. I'd say don't try to do more than one hit, just do a single tap and then run off. And then finally, the Ferryman's Lantern, probably the absolute best weapon to fight this thing, and you can see that in this video that I posted on YouTube Shorts. When it comes to ranged weapons, keep in mind that the Scarecrow is always chasing after the player, so some of the longest range weapons maybe don't do too well. Things like the Marksman Bow, you might find yourself having difficulties actually laying the shot at maximum range. Weapons such as explosive crossbow probably need a little bit more wind up on the square button, so you may end up having to just use triangle more often. Boomerang ends up not sticking the Scarecrow because you often have to roll through it. Barrel launcher might get reflected to you, so if you go into this fight without Masochist, you might end up taking tons of damage from your own barrels. And finally, Fire Blast and Lightning Bolt have that charged stance, so having to think about doing dodge rolls in between charging the attack is probably more trouble than it's worth when it comes to Scarecrow. Even some of our two-handed buddies, such as Heavy Crossbow and Repeaters, sometimes struggle in this fight. Heavy Crossbow pulls Scarecrow in and lands the hit, but there's a good chance Scarecrow will actually slash you after you hit it. This is a good opportunity to use Ice Armor, but definitely don't expect to get away with a no-hit. Repeater Crossbow, second ability, does not keep Scarecrow stuck in place. Even if it has the root icon over its head, it is still trying to chase the player. Luckily, Repeater's triangle button is good enough to kill things, especially with the new Barb Tips mutation. In this case, you can probably just spam triangle and run while you're waiting for the Barb Tips to kill the monster. Weapons that actually do really well in this fight are some of our favorite throwing weapons, say things like the kunai, ice shards, firebrand. Electric whip has auto targeting, so that does really well when you jump off the bounce pad. Same thing with magic missile, which is not something that I would say lightly. Damage over time, such as alchemic carbine with Hokuto, does well, so you can focus on the dodge roll. Hemorrhage does really well because you only need to land one hit every now and then and still do really good damage. And then finally, because Scarecrow's always running at you, you may as well just use infantry bow. If it wants to stay that close, it may as well just take the damage for it too. Just keep in mind that Scarecrow does not have a phase change, so you need to have a way to get your ammo back. One of the easiest ways to get ammo is from parry. Of course, parrying a lot of things in the game is a little scary, so I would recommend just using Armadillo Pack. Finally, when it comes to the powers in Dead Cells, there really isn't a single power that doesn't work in this fight. Even things like Death Orb aren't too bad because you can constantly put Scarecrow in front of it. Explosive Decoy and the Door aren't terrible because they do actually deal damage through burning oil or the bombs that drop from them. If I can just point out a couple of things that are maybe a little questionable in this fight, obviously there's the Stun Grenade. Swarm Grenade, aka the Wormettes, instantly die to pretty much every attack the Scarecrow does, and Scarecrow's relentless. And then the Grey Owl might be a little tough to use in here. If you play Protect the Owl style where it's just keep away, you're probably fine. But if the owl is your main source of damage and you take a hit, you're gonna be doing nothing but dodge rolls for a long time. Powers that work exceptionally well in this fight include the Tesla. Tesla is able to hit the Scarecrow at almost any position, almost at any time. Ice Grenade and Fire Grenade work really well. Fire Grenade especially because it also kills the Mushroom Boys that the Scarecrow spawns. And then another sleeper hit is the Cocoon in this fight. Funny enough, the Cocoon actually circumvents a lot of issues in the fight. For example, the Down Slam, you can actually do the Cocoon directly under the Scarecrow, block the Down Slam, get some attacks in, and then you can either A, do the Cocoon again for the sickle, or you just dodge roll. In fact, almost any time that the Scarecrow is even looking at you, if you press the Cocoon button, it will probably work and probably get a reset. Mutation wise, I already mentioned Armadillo Pack works really well. Acrobatic Pack works really well. Vengeance works exceptionally well because this thing never stops attacking. If you're using slow weapons, you may want to consider bringing in Kill Rhythm, but there's not many mutations in here that do some super special effect that they don't normally do in a regular game. Alright, and that's basically it for the Scarecrow. This isn't a fight that I outright avoid, I just know some builds and some items don't do very well against it. So at that point, I try to take care on which boss I'm choosing to go to. If I have a build that uses Wolf Trap, I might want to go to Scarecrow. If I have a build that might be using Phaser, I might want to go to the Timekeeper instead, because that's something that can really keep up with Timekeeper's movements. If I have something like Double Turret, I might consider going to the Giant. However, if I have double grenades, I might decide to go to the Scarecrow instead. And if I get the no-hit, then great. If not, then at least I didn't lose the whole run. Besides that, this is a really cool boss music, great design, great trailer that went behind it. If you made it this far in the video, if you learned anything, if you wanted to contribute and drop some knowledge yourself, leave a comment and subscribe. Let me know that this was helpful to you in really any capacity. If you want to catch me actually fighting the Scarecrow, you can see me live on twitch.tv/VeeDotMe. And yeah, good luck with your Scarecrow fights.